George's return from the dead spread through every street and alley. He was the Empire's greatest general, killed in battle for his country, now back from hell itself, carrying medals of glory. The whole city rejoiced over the miracle of their hero's resurrection. Everyone, except me, his forcibly matched little widower. My late husband, who died so peacefully, suddenly came back to life, which meant I was probably going to get, well, reclaimed. Not exactly thrilled about that. Outside my door, I could hear the guards whispering. I heard that after General George died, his fiancée, the Omega, cried so hard he fainted several times. Poor thing. Honestly, I think that little widower inside is even more pitiful. If that original fiancé hadn't refused to marry him, he wouldn't have been force-matched to the general in the first place. Now that George is back, there's no way he'll keep a low-grade Omega. Poor guy's probably getting kicked out soon. Look at him, eyes all red, terrified out of his mind. Ever since he heard the Major General's alive, he's locked himself in his room. So sad. If the general doesn't want him, I'd take him home. I wasn't thinking that far ahead, because the moment I saw my supposedly dead future husband from afar, my brain completely froze. If that's the real General George, then who was the man who tangled with me that night a few months ago, kissing me until the world spun? I slowly lowered my gaze, lifted my shirt and stared at my slightly rounded belly in the mirror, silently calculating my remaining lifespan. In short, I was pregnant, and the baby probably wasn't the general's. 4 months ago, I had volunteered to become George's widower, not out of admiration like the other Omegas swooning over the Empire's hero. Back then, I was a starving slum worker, unpaid for weeks, dizzy from hunger. When I heard that being George's mourning spouse came with food, I signed up. Guess I took the role a little too seriously, because the late general decided to come back to life. Carefully, I wrapped a silk band around my stomach to hide the bump. The soft pink birthmark by my waist had rubbed raw against the coarse fabric, faintly visible, embarrassingly intimate. God, when would this nightmare end? Just then, a horn blared outside. I went to the window and looked down. Crowd surrounded a man stepping out of a sleek car. George emerged, tall and cold, as someone draped a long coat over his shoulders. His expression was unreadable, calm, distant, untouchable. He was the Empire's most powerful general, and I was the low-grade Omega forcibly matched to him. Now that George was alive again, I was nothing but a stain on his reputation. Getting kicked out was inevitable, but if he ever found out I was pregnant, with someone else's child, he'd kill me. No doubt about it. My lashes trembled as I clenched the edge of my sleeve. No, he must never find out. I tightened the band around my stomach a little more. When George entered the house surrounded by officers, his eyes immediately found me. That cool, detached gaze lingered, expressionless, unreadable. Someone beside him finally realized, oh right, there was that Omega who'd been matched to him after his death. One of them shot me a look, then barked coldly, "Why are you still here? Didn't we tell you to leave?" Ah, so that's how they planned to deal with me, quietly erase the embarrassment before George even noticed. That was fine by me. The less he knew, the better. At least he'd never find out he'd been spectacularly cheated on, and I'd have a perfect excuse to slip away. But before their plan could work perfectly, George suddenly lifted his gaze, that icy tone cutting through the air. "Who is he?" He's Jackson. A low-grade Omega," someone stammered. "During the period we thought you'd passed, the higher-ups matched him to you. We'll send him away immediately." George's eyes stayed on me, calm, distant, and unwavering. It made my skin crawl. Did he notice something? Everyone expected him to tell this shameless, useless Omega to get out. Instead, he said flatly, "No need. He stays." The officer blinked, confused but obedient. "Of course, sir. It's just, this Omega hasn't been properly trained. If you prefer someone else." He gave me a discreet look, signaling me to leave. I turned to go, but before I could take a step, a large hand grabbed my waist and pulled me firmly into a hard chest. George looked down at me, voice like ice. "They matched my Omega, and you think someone else should be the one to train him?" The room went dead silent. Everyone exchanged glances, then quietly slipped out, shutting the door behind them. Now it was just me and George, two total strangers, alone. The awkwardness was unbearable. I tried to wriggle free, but right then, my tightly bound stomach shifted. "Oh no, kid, not now. You've got the wrong dad." George's hand was still resting on my belly. The unmistakable kick pulsed right against his palm, the movement faint but real. He definitely felt it. His brow twitched as his hand brushed the spot again, then stilled, puzzled. My heart was pounding so loud it might explode. There was no hiding it now. I was done for. And then, George frowned slightly and muttered, "When did you get so round?" I blinked, completely lost. What is he even talking about? He pressed his lips together, all serious authority again. Your stomach's moving. Are you hungry? To prove that I was really just hungry, I forced myself to fight through the nausea and downed 3 bowls of rice, 2 plates of meat, and a whole bowl of fish soup right in front of him. George's face didn't change at all. So what if he called me a balloon? I could take it. After all, I'd already cheated on him. Seemed only fair. Right now, escaping was my top priority. I looked up at him. Aren't you afraid I'll eat you out of house and home? George stayed calm, then, out of nowhere, the corner of his mouth twitched up slightly. I can afford it. He looked way too pleased with himself. Meanwhile, I stared down at the piece of cabbage buried under my rice, stabbing it with my chopsticks like it had personally offended me. That night, since I had to share a bed with an alpha, I didn't dare take off the cloth wrapped around my stomach. I could only pray he wouldn't suddenly decide to act on instinct with a low-grade omega like me. George worked late into the night, handling his military files in the study. When I heard his footsteps approach, I immediately shut my eyes and pretended to be asleep, clutching the blanket so tightly my knuckles went white. But then, the air filled with his alpha pheromones, warm and strangely soothing. My discomfort faded, along with every bit of tension I'd been holding on to. Lying beside him, I fell into a long, vivid dream. In the dark of night, a blood-soaked alpha broke into my room. His crimson eyes glowed like something dragged straight out of hell. My heart nearly stopped. Who are you? I whispered. Only George and his guards could unlock that door, and I'd seen all of them before. So if it wasn't a guard, could it be George? Or his ghost? Before I could think, his pheromones crashed over me, triggering my heat. I could barely speak, only managed to croak out, "Are you a ghost?" No answer, just a harsher, more desperate kiss. I couldn't fight him. My only response was a helpless, breathless sound against his lips. When I woke, he was gone. The room was a mess, and a few strange black feathers floated on the floor. It all felt like a nightmare, except the ache in my body told me it had been very, very real. And the bastard actually came back a second time. Did he think my husband being dead gave him a free pass? Okay, fine. The husband part was technically true, or so everyone thought. According to the soldiers who came back, George was as dead gets. By the time that intruder showed up again, I was already carrying a child. The moment he appeared, I held a knife to his throat. The night was too dark to see his face clearly, but I tried to sound fierce. "Are you human or ghost?" I demanded. His eyes flicked down, immediately catching sight of my slightly swollen belly. His gaze darkened. "Looks like you've been eating well," he said dryly. He grabbed the blade with his bare hand, and blood ran down his fingers. "You're hurt," I said without thinking. "Let me see." He ignored me, acting like the room belonged to him, and tried to push me down to check the wound himself. At the same time, I shoved the knife into his chest. Blood splattered, and in retaliation, he bit down hard on my neck, leaving a brutal mark. 2 people hurting each other to the brink of collapse. That was the only way to describe it. As my vision blurred and the knife slipped from my hand, he leaned close and murmured against my ear, "Then take me as a ghost, darling, because you'll never get rid of me." I jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat, heart hammering, and right there in front of me, George, eyes dark, still half bent over, tucking the blanket around me. Without thinking, I slapped him. Hard. A red mark slowly bloomed across his face. I froze, horrified at myself. But George only lowered his eyes, that shadowy expression giving nothing away, and quietly asked, "Where's the ghost?" I stared at him for a long second, then cowardly slid back under the blanket. "No ghost. Just a bad dream," I mumbled. George's lashes lowered, and then, so gently it startled me, he pressed a light kiss to my forehead. "The butler's made breakfast," he said. "Eat while it's hot." George didn't stay long before leaving. When I lowered my head, I suddenly realized the cloth I'd tied tightly around my waist had somehow loosened, as if someone had untied it while I was asleep. The small birthmark on my waist, the one that always looked faintly pink, was now flushed red, almost like it had been kissed. Was that normal for pregnancy? Great, just what I needed. Now it was even harder to hide. I was so annoyed I couldn't even finish breakfast. I forced down a spoonful of hot porridge anyway. It settled my stomach a bit. That's when I heard noise outside. A guard's voice. "Sir, you can't enter. The general didn't give permission to see you." And an Omega's arrogant shout. "Get George out here. I'm his fiancé. Do you idiots have a death wish stopping me?" The yelling made my head throb. I had zero desire to get involved with George's so-called fiancé. I got up, ready to slip out of the dining hall quietly, but the Omega spotted me immediately. "So you're the lowlife who seduced George," he sneered. A filthy slum rat who doesn't know his place. What did any of this have to do with me? As if things weren't messy enough with my dead husband coming back to life. The Omega's pheromones filled the air, sharp and aggressive. It made my stomach twist in pain. I lost my patience and snapped, "Get lost." That one word actually made him flinch. Then, realizing he'd just been scolded by a low-grade Omega, his face twisted with fury. He raised his hand to slap me, but a tall figure stepped in front of me, blocking the hit midair. "The general is busy," the man said calmly. He gave orders, "No one enters. If you keep making a scene, you'll be punished under military law." The Omega huffed, realizing he wasn't going to win, and stormed off. When the guard turned back to me, he asked softly, "Are you all right?" I looked up and froze. It was the young soldier who'd once joked about taking me home. Our eyes met, and he blushed. "You don't look so well," he murmured. "I'm fine," I said, though my thoughts were spinning. Wait, could he have been the one that night? His face had some similarities, 3 points, maybe 4, but the room had been dark. If it was Henry, he'd had both motive and opportunity. I lowered my eyes, clutching the fabric at my waist. If it really was him, he probably had no idea I was carrying his child, and even if he did, I had no intention of keeping it. Still, maybe he could help me keep the secret from George. As I walked aimlessly down the hall, my thoughts tangled, I suddenly heard voices from behind a half-closed door. "George's study. The Omega, you really plan to keep him?" someone asked. "He's got something on you. A secret that could ruin you." George didn't even look up. "So what do you suggest?" The man hesitated, then made a sharp hand gesture. "Get rid of him. Permanently." There was a pause, then a suspicious tone. "George, why are you smiling?" I peeked through the crack and saw George's lips curl just slightly, barely noticeable, but in that context, it was chilling. "Nothing," he said mildly. "I just thought of the surprise my Omega left for me behind my back. It made me happy." Silence. The other man exhaled sharply. "You and your Omega. You're impossible." "Fine. Whatever. Pretend I said nothing." I quietly backed away, my heart pounding. Blackmail? What blackmail could I possibly have over George? If I really had something, I would have used it already to get out of here. And what surprise. Did he mean the pregnancy? Oh God. Was that why he smiled? No, impossible. Unless the man that night was George. The thought sent a chill down my spine. Could he have known all along? No, no way. That's ridiculous. Still, I couldn't stop the thought from spiraling. Fine, I told myself. I'd confirm it myself. So that night, I repeated the same plan as before. Pretend to be asleep, wait for George to relax, then sneak a look. Except, his pheromones were just too comforting. I fell asleep again. When I woke up at dawn, he was still sleeping beside me. The morning light touched his face, making him look unreal, sharp jawline, dark lashes, calm breathing. He was dangerously beautiful. I swallowed hard and slowly lifted his shirt. My eyes went straight to his chest. Smooth, unmarked, no scar at all. Not George, definitely not. Relief washed through me, then, strangely, a hint of disappointment. I started to lower his shirt back down, when his eyes suddenly opened. Caught red-handed. "What are you doing?" His voice was low, dangerous. I froze. My mind went blank. The blanket slipped off the bed. We stared at each other, both breathless. George's expression darkened. With one hand, he easily flipped me over and pinned me down. I gasped softly as he grabbed my wrists and tied them to the headboard with practiced precision. His voice, however, softened just a little. "Nothing you want to tell me," he murmured. "You're shaking. Are you scared because you remembered something?" His breath brushed against my ear. I panicked. I don't know anything," I blurted, before realizing that wasn't even what he'd asked. George's eyes narrowed. "Then why are you nervous?" He leaned closer, gaze sliding down my neck to my collarbone. "Tell me, sweetheart, are you trembling because you did something wrong, or because you just want my attention?" He tied the knot tighter, a neat little bow. His fingers trailed down from my chin, past my throat, brushing lightly against my skin. "Relax," he whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." I held my breath, heart pounding so hard it hurt. His hand was only inches from my stomach. One more move, and he'd see the truth I'd been hiding. Then, the door burst open. A guard rushed in, breathless. "General, the doctor you requested has arrived." George's frown deepened. His hand froze, just half a centimeter above my belly. He straightened slowly, voice cool. "Send him in later." The guard, clearly mortified to have walked in on that, bowed and fled. George gave a low laugh, withdrawing his hand. "How considerate of them," he said softly. "They're worried I didn't come back in one piece." No one in the room dared to breathe. He stood, then paused, turning his gaze back on me. His eyes dropped to my stomach, brow furrowing. "You ate too much yesterday," he said casually. "Your belly's still round. I'll have a doctor who specializes in omegas take a look tomorrow, see if it's indigestion." Right, indigestion. If that doctor saw my stomach, I might as well tattoo "I'm pregnant" across my forehead. I lowered my head, biting my tongue to keep from saying something stupid. Honestly, the only thing anyone cared about was making sure I didn't die too easily. When George finally left, I untied my hands and took a deep breath. Then I turned to the guard by the door. "Please," I said quietly, "go find Henry for me." 5. When Henry rushed in, his forehead was still damp with sweat and water. "You wanted to see me?" I hid the red marks on my wrists and got straight to the point. "Henry, tell me honestly, do you like me?" Henry's ears went bright red. Yeah, I do." That confirmed it. Only he would have had the guts to do what happened that night. He scratched the back of his neck, clearly nervous. "I just like you in secret. I'd never let the general know. I decided to come clean." Pulling the blanket away, my loose robe slipped open, and my belly, which I could no longer hide, was revealed. Henry's pupils widened instantly. "You know George's been back for 3 days, right?" The words came out calm, but my heart was pounding. The baby had come unexpectedly. I had no choice but to take a gamble. "I'm 3 months along now. You know I don't want to die in George's hands. You're the only one who can help me." Henry looked utterly lost, like he'd just been told he'd become a dad out of nowhere. After a long pause, he muttered under his breath, frowning. "So, I get a wife and a baby for free? Not bad." I was still thinking about how to make him admit the child was his when he suddenly said, "What?" "Nothing." Henry coughed awkwardly, cheeks flushing. "The general's giving a peace speech at noon. I came to pick you up." He left soon after, and it wasn't long before George returned. Before heading to his speech, he stormed into my room. His face was cold. He tilted my chin up and asked, "You seem to be getting quite familiar with one of my guards." Of course he knew. My every move was probably reported to him. Still, I didn't expect him to overreact like this. "What, was he part hedgehog?" I tried to sound casual. "Which guard?" "Henry." He didn't give me a chance to dodge. I had him reassigned. The butler must have told him I had trouble remembering names, that Henry was the only one I specifically asked for. So I remembered one name. So what? My eyes stung a little as I met his sharp gaze. Did he have to be so damn smart? It's not like I wanted any of this to happen. I snapped, "I hate you." George froze. "You hate me?" He looked genuinely thrown off, almost hurt. Then his tone changed. "Hate me, huh? I can make you hate me more." His voice dropped lower, darker. "If you won't behave, I'll have someone else train you. You know how they do it. Make an omega ride a rope until they cry." That was definitely a threat. A terrible one. I immediately drew my legs together and sat up straight like the picture of obedience. "I'll behave." 6. I don't know what Henry did, but right after George left, Henry showed up with a car. He'd actually pulled off a perfect distraction. I didn't hesitate. I ran with him. Meanwhile, on stage, George was in the middle of his big peace speech. "I propose we establish a lasting peace with the beast forest. After years of war, our empire." Then someone rushed onto the stage, whispering something in his ear. Something that exploded in the room like thunder. "General, your spouse ran off with someone." Unfortunately, George's mic was still on, so the entire audience, and the entire empire, apparently, heard it loud and clear. "General, your spouse ran off with someone. General, your spouse ran off with someone. General, your spouse ran off with someone." The poor translator panicked and accidentally broadcasted it on every channel. Half the nation heard it. And just like that, the most humiliating echo in imperial history was born. In the car, I sneezed hard. The air conditioner was freezing. Henry handed me a blanket. "You cold, brother?" I shook my head. It wasn't my body that was cold. It was my heart. George was furious. Furious enough to chase me publicly. He'd rather let the whole world know he'd been cheated on than let me go. Petty man. Ruthless alpha. I added that to my growing list of grudges. 7. Within days, the general's spouse ran off, became the biggest scandal in the empire. People assumed George would kick me out, that I'd be finished. But to everyone's shock, it was him who got exiled from home first. I was terrified he'd catch me, furious and humiliated, and throw me into the beast forest. That's where they sent disobedient omegas. And I was terrified of beasts. So I didn't dare step outside for days. When I finally heard George's peace deal had been rejected and he was being sent back to the front lines, I poked my head out of my little nest. Henry brought me a cup of warm water. "Brother, have some water." I sipped quietly, eyes red. Why doesn't your pheromone work? Henry froze. Awkward. Maybe my pheromone level isn't strong enough. I could try to find a similar one. Oh, great. Find another alpha's pheromone to comfort his runaway omega. Why not have the baby call someone else dad while we're at it? I was moody and hormonal. I grabbed his wrist and pinned him to the floor. His skin was damp, his pheromone heavy in the air, the scent tracing down his neck to his lips. He swallowed hard. Brother. I stared at him. You're an alpha, aren't you? Or are you just pretending? How little must you care about someone if you can't even give them your pheromone? He looked down, a little sad. Brother, my pheromone doesn't match with the baby's. If I force it, it could hurt you, or the child. My mind blanked. Wait, what? It took me a moment to process. You mean, the baby isn't yours? Henry blinked, all innocence. Ha, it's not. You mean calling you wife once at night and sneaking a kiss doesn't make someone pregnant? Definitely not him. The alpha who got me pregnant wasn't this clueless. I let go of him and sighed. I didn't know. I used you to escape George, and I'm sorry. Henry shook his head. It's fine. You don't like him anyway. Better to be away from that wolf's den. I nodded faintly and picked up my phone, confirming my appointment for the abortion. Damn it, on my way to end the pregnancy, I ran straight into the man who ruined my life. A thick metallic scent mixed with something wild and intoxicating filled the alley. The smell came from a man collapsed on the ground, a stranger. It was almost identical to that night. One glance at his face, and my stomach dropped. Even under the dirt and blood, I could tell, his features were 7 or 8 parts similar to that bastard who had tangled with me in the dark. And the clothes he wore, I recognized them. George had the exact same luxury brand outfit hanging in his private wardrobe. This guy wasn't some random stranger. Henry and I carried him home, one in front, one behind. Henry glanced at the man lying on the bed and muttered to me, "Bro, he's half beast, half human." I froze for a second. When I pulled aside the blood-stained fabric, black gold feathers glimmered faintly under the light, bird-like, inhuman. Half beast, half human. I echoed. Henry explained patiently, yeah, people who show beast traits when they're weak. Rare bloodline. I only read about them in military school. The survival rate of such hybrids is less than 5%, and even those who live, tend to have issues. He hesitated. He's part beast, bro. The government's been rounding them up. Should we turn him in? I paused, then shook my head. Not yet. Henry looked a little disappointed and tugged my sleeve. Bro, then, are you still gonna go through with it? The abortion? What does catching that scumbag have to do with me keeping the baby? I sighed. Yeah, I'm still going. Henry seemed oddly relieved by my answer. Just then, the man on the bed coughed up blood and sat up abruptly. You can't do it, he rasped. You can't abort it. I turned to him, brows furrowing. Why not? He choked on his words. Sure, he might be the biological father, but he didn't even know this child existed. He had never once cared for me. He had no right to speak. After a long silence, he finally mumbled, because, that's our baby. He looked up at me, voice trembling. He's been good to you, hasn't he? He never caused you pain, right? If he's born, he's yours. I won't fight you for him. Oh, so you just don't want to take responsibility? I crossed my arms and glared. According to the Omega Protection Act and the Human-Beast Alliance law, even if you're half-beast, I can sue you, you know that? The man blinked in confusion. Wait, what? Before I could finish, he grabbed me, pulling me straight into his arms. I didn't say I wouldn't take responsibility. I'll pay for everything, medical care, nutrition, whatever you need. Wife and child, I'll take care of both. Wife? My heart gave a sharp jolt. Low-level omegas rarely get pregnant. If I lose this one, I might never conceive again. Getting pregnant by someone with beast blood usually means his level is far above mine. If he truly wanted to take responsibility, maybe I wouldn't have to worry about George anymore. And yet, I shook my head firmly. I'm not your wife. As terrified as I was of George, I couldn't betray him, not completely. Not when the world still thought he was dead. His death had, in a twisted way, saved my life. The man's expression darkened. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. But when his gaze shifted to Henry, it turned murderous. Henry was the only alpha in the house capable of doing chores. But since the baby and I had nothing to do with him, I felt bad relying on him all the time. The stranger, still bedridden, his body wrecked, couldn't feed himself, much less us. So I decided to go out and buy some essentials. The moment I stepped out with a bag of inhibitors, someone screamed, pointing at me. You've got beast feathers on you. My heart froze. I'd been glued to that man for the past few days, our scents mixed, our bodies close. Of course I'd end up with a few stray feathers on me. That man loved biting my neck, pressing me down, whispering filthy things against my skin until I trembled. I'd bite his feathers just to make him stop, but it only excited him more. No wonder some had stuck to my clothes. But in this city, humans hated beasts. The shout drew a crowd in seconds. He's one of them. Those monsters pretending to be human. It's their dirty blood that got General George injured on the front lines. My son's still out there fighting. Even a dog barked furiously, woof woof woof, as if to confirm my guilt. A rotten egg hit my shoulder. Then came vegetable leaves, curses, stones. They didn't see the truth. They only smelled it. The faint trace of mixed blood in my body, barely a quarter beast, was enough to damn me. Stop. I'm not, please don't. I tried to shout, clutching my stomach. The pressure inside ached painfully. Someone shoved me. I fell, bracing for the impact. But strong arms caught me before I hit the ground. I looked up. That back, I knew it. The uniform I had mended myself. But this wasn't the same man. He was taller, broader, his presence cold and commanding. And then, the scent hit me. Two distinct pheromones, one human, one beast, blending into something overwhelmingly familiar. The crowd gasped. General George? No, he's a beast too. The truth struck like lightning. That stranger from before, he wasn't someone else. He was George. George, the Empire's #1 general. Half human, half beast. It felt like the kind of secret people died for knowing. And judging by his sharp temper, I was already as good as dead. My knees went weak. I turned to flee, but his arm wrapped around my waist before I could take a step. His long fingers pressed gently against my slightly swollen belly. His voice slid against my ear, low, dangerous, and far too intimate. Baby, where are you planning to run off with my child? For a split second, I was back in that nightmare of a night, his breath against my ear, his hand over my eyes, his whisper dripping like poison. Baby, don't ever think you can escape me. And through the haze of memory, I saw it again. Those black gold feathers, rising like wings of fate. Get out. That was the first thing I said to George after returning home. I glared at him coldly. I'm just a low-level Omega. My place is too small to hold a great general like you. He tugged at my clothes, trying to pull me into his arms. Wife. I snapped my head up, eyes red. General, is this role-playing fun for you? Honestly, the worst part wasn't that he'd slept with me. If a man picks up an abandoned Omega, kisses him a few times, takes him to bed, it's not unforgivable. What I couldn't stand was that he'd lied to me. Again and again. He'd scared me half to death more times than I could count. Now, just seeing his face gave me nightmares. Baby, he said softly, you cried so hard that night, and you still didn't see my face. Even when I showed my true form, you didn't remember. Wait, he expected me to see anything back then? Who can tell who's who when they're half-conscious and, well, busy? Besides, I'd blacked out before the end. What did he expect? If George really was part beast, with their healing speed, then the wound I gave him that night would have healed clean long ago. I curled up on the couch, miserable. Just then, knock, knock, knock. When I opened the door, I froze. Government officers stood outside. Good afternoon, one of them said briskly. We've received reports that you're harboring General George, and due to concerns about his political identity, he must be taken in for investigation. My heart dropped. I turned stiffly toward the only person I could trust. Did I do something wrong? I whispered. When I saw the soldiers pointing real guns at George, panic hit me hard. If I hadn't gone out with those stupid black feathers still stuck on me, no one would have guessed he was a beast. No one would have known he was here. I didn't love him that much, but I didn't want to watch him fall from glory into ruin either. I stepped in front of him. Do you have a warrant to enter this home? But then I felt warmth against my back, a solid chest, strong arms. George, right there, in front of everyone, he bent his head and kissed the back of my neck, right where my gland was most sensitive. His voice was low, almost teasing. Don't be afraid. Let me handle this, baby. I clenched my fists. I'm not scared. He chuckled darkly. Oh, I know. My baby's brave enough to cheat on her husband. How could he laugh right now? That's what I hated most about him. He was always so sure of himself, even when the world was falling apart. I was scared for the little one, I muttered under my breath. Let go, you annoying man ghost. I had no idea how George managed to delay the investigation, but he did. Next thing I knew, I was back in his place, his den, really, while he hovered like a wolf guarding its prey. He called in a doctor to check on my pregnancy. The procedure was gentle, and before I knew it, I'd fallen asleep. When I woke, I heard voices outside. The doctor's tone was grave. Malnutrition. Risk of miscarriage. Likely caused by prolonged psychological stress. George's voice turned sharp. Get to the point. The doctor adjusted his glasses. In simple terms, you're scaring your Omega to death. He sighed. You're officially the first alpha I've seen who's managed to frighten his mate into nearly miscarrying. Congratulations, you're a legend. George's expression darkened. What's so terrifying about me? Do I look that scary? The doctor gave him a long look. You really don't notice that gloomy, predatory aura of yours, especially when you're near him? Can it be fixed? George asked flatly. If you have any conscience left, the doctor said, let another alpha stay with your Omega. Someone who won't make him panic every time he breathes. It might save both your mate and your unborn child. George's voice dropped an octave. Say that again, and I'll kill you. Wow. His mood swings were wild. I blacked out again from sheer fear. 12. George asked Henry to stay with me while he went off to face the investigation. The way he looked at me before leaving, cold and dark, made it clear. Once I gave birth, someone was getting stabbed. Yikes. My husband was totally ready to kill someone. Terrifying. Henry wasn't exactly good at taking care of a pregnant man. He treated me like a kid, fumbling through the whole process until he somehow turned into a full-on mother mode caretaker. I couldn't help but laugh every few minutes. Then, my communication screen suddenly lit up with a new message. Baby, smile at that man again, and once you give birth, I'll make sure you're too tired to laugh at anyone else. I froze. It wasn't that I wanted to smile. George just didn't understand that I wasn't naturally cheerful. Watching from the surveillance feed, George finally saw his Omega behaving himself and lifted his head again, crossing his legs calmly before the tribunal. The high-ranking officials began reading his charges. As a lowly beastman hybrid, you deceived the Empire by pretending to be human and rising through the ranks. You may have colluded with the enemy. George's face stayed unreadable, silent as a stone. People were always wary of him for one reason. When George negotiated, no one could ever guess how many trump cards he still had hidden. That's why even the judges were cautious. No one realized he looked so calm only because he was busy wondering if his Omega had run off with another alpha. If a high-ranking general ever turned against us, he'd become humanity's greatest enemy. It'd be a fight to the death. Fight to the death? George finally spoke, lifting his eyes with a faint smirk. Then go ahead, die. Wasn't this supposed to be a peaceful hearing? Why did it feel like he'd just found out his spouse cheated and went feral? He stood up, straightening his uniform. If you have questions, take them to my father, your superior. I'm sure the public would find his early love life much more fascinating than mine. 13. George managed to turn the tables, poison versus poison, and came out clean. If both the nation's political and spiritual leaders were implicated, the entire government would have collapsed. So the official story became, that man wasn't George at all. The real General George had been injured and unconscious for half a month. For 2 days, the man who merely looked like him was shredded by the public online, until the outrage slowly faded. When I heard George was back, I sent Henry home. 1. Because I was genuinely afraid George might actually kill someone. 2. Because long-term emotional reliance between unrelated AOs wasn't good for the baby. But when George finally arrived, I still went weak in the knees. Baby, he stood outside the door, red-eyed. You really don't want me anymore? I opened the door and stammered nervously. I have size trauma. It was true. I was terrified of how large beastmen could be. I'd rather die in a poor district or stand under a flickering streetlight in the worst part of town than live in the beastmen forest. A short-term thing, maybe, but a lifetime? No way. George caught my hand, guiding it slowly downward. But you weren't afraid of mine, were you? That means you can overcome it, right? I turned red. Oh no. Was this seduction? How was I supposed to win against that? So, yes, maybe I gave in, a little. My face flushed, I crouched slightly, mumbling. I'm still scared, maybe, kiss me first. 14. George took me home to meet his family. I expected a beautiful mother, a charming father, and a tragic son caught in between. But no, the truth was, a scorned father, a sarcastic mother, and a son ready to swing a sword. His father, the deputy leader of the Beastmen Forest, greeted us warmly, shaking George's hand. Heard your wife ran away. Congrats, son. Then his eyes dropped straight to my swollen belly. Oh, wait, congrats again. You were gone 10 months, she's 7 months along. Timing's perfect. George's lips twitched coldly. Shut it. My wife came back on her own. And that's my kid in there. His father nodded thoughtfully, then took my hand. Poor thing. What kind of blackmail does he have on you? I swallowed nervously. I wasn't trying to run away. Just, accidentally got the wrong dad for the baby. Fear aside, we were still true love, probably. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but his mother, George's Omega parent, Beat me to it, wide-eyed in sympathy. 7 months and you still haven't managed to run? Wow, rough luck. Was this family support? I tugged at George's sleeve. That's your mom. He nodded. I think so. Then, with his usual caution, added, after I was born, people said so. He never denied it. Such a precise, emotionally detached answer. Suddenly, his personality made so much sense. I rubbed my restless belly and sighed. Little one, please don't inherit your dad's family quirks. Looks like you and I are the only sane ones left in this house.